Breaking today, royal fury as Prince Harry and Meghan Markle disgustingly hijack the centenary celebrations of the late Queen Elizabeth II, despite the fact that members of this family who were at Buckingham Palace yesterday have not forgotten.
The centenary of Queen Elizabeth II turned into a moment where two very different stories played out side by side, and nobody needed to explain the contrast. It was right there in plain sight. At Buckingham Palace, the working royals came together to honor the occasion in a deeply personal way. Catherine, Princess of Wales, was seen sharing a heartfelt moment with 88-year-old George Cross recipient Tony Gladhill, who attended because it had been his late wife's wish. It was quiet, respectful, and genuinely emotional, something that didn't need headlines to feel meaningful.
Of people around the Queen thought Meghan was, by the end, showing narcissistic tendencies. And the Queen was famously good at concealing her true thought.
But at that exact same time, a completely different kind of operation was rolling out. Meghan Markle launched a wave of influencer gift boxes, timed right on cue with the centenary. These packages promoted candles with descriptions tied to royal titles, alongside handwritten style notes talking about afternoons picking flowers with Lilibet and cozy evenings snuggling with Archie and Harry. It felt carefully staged, polished, and designed to grab attention fast. Meanwhile, Prince Harry was making headlines in a different way, through a media briefing that quickly raised eyebrows. He shared with Town & Country magazine that he had sent flowers to the Queen's resting place at Windsor Castle. On the surface, it sounded like a thoughtful gesture.
To avoid phone calls from Harry, or she'd make sure that someone was with her because she would end up so distressed because he would be shouting down the phone at her over the security, over what he wanted.
But what followed made people question everything. The publication reported the story, noting this wasn't the first time he had sent flowers. They also mentioned that on the one-year anniversary in 2023, he had visited St. George's Chapel privately. That word, privately, stood out in a big way because what happened next didn't match it at all. A press release was sent out to highlight that same private act, and that's where things started to feel off. If a moment is truly private, why announce it right after? The second a journalist is told about the details, the entire meaning shifts. What could have been a quiet tribute suddenly turns into something that looks planned and strategic. Sending flowers to someone's resting place usually carries emotional weight because it's personal and unseen. It's something done out of love and respect, not for recognition.
Exclusively told me it gives me PTSD. It's classic Meghan, literally a workplace psychopath, smiling to the public on one side of her face and glowering at you on the secret side. The woman treats anyone she has power over as totally disposable. You are just treated like a tradesman who is there to fix the toilet.
But once it's shared publicly, especially with specific details, it stops being just about remembrance. It starts to look like a move designed to shape perception. And that's the key issue here. It's not just about manners or tradition. It reveals a deeper pattern in how public gestures and private moments get mixed together. The focus shifts from the act itself to the reaction it creates. Looking back, this moment doesn't stand alone either. There had already been tension in earlier years, including reported disagreements and missed chances to reconnect during important times. On top of that, there were major public projects, like a Netflix documentary and a memoir, that brought private family matters into the spotlight in a very public way. Robert Hardman isn't some random voice from the sidelines. He's one of the most established royal commentators in the British media, with decades of trusted access behind him. He writes for the Daily Mail in a tone that's carefully balanced, the kind that protects long-standing relationships while still delivering insight. So when he speaks, it's not guesswork. It carries serious weight.
Meghan Markle is now specifically making money and attempting to launch a business on the late Queen's nickname.
That's why what he reported about Queen Elizabeth II matters so much. According to Hardman, people very close to the Queen were absolutely certain she had noticed troubling behavior patterns from Meghan Markle. This wasn't framed as opinion or exaggeration. It was presented as information coming directly from her inner circle, shared carefully but clearly. What makes this even more striking is how Hardman describes the Queen's original approach. She wasn't distant or dismissive. In fact, it was the complete opposite. She took real time and effort to think about how Meghan could fit into royal life in a meaningful way. Every detail was considered. What roles would suit her, what responsibilities would align with her interests, and how she could build something that truly mattered. The selection of patronages wasn't rushed or random. It was thoughtful, deliberate, and shaped by the Queen's own values. At first, these roles were accepted with enthusiasm. But then, according to Hardman, everything shifted dramatically. They were, in his words, torn up. That sudden change didn't just confuse people, it created a wave of frustration that kept building behind palace walls. What started as quiet confusion slowly turned into something more serious.
But as the Royal News Network posted, I'm sorry, but why the heck does Meghan Markle think that anyone wants to be reminded of picking flowers with Lily or snuggling with Archie? If these were made for her own personal consumption, sure, but I don't get why in this world.
Those closest to the Queen came to a firm conclusion. She felt let down. That sense of disappointment wasn't based on one moment. It came from a pattern that became harder to ignore over time. And this version of events doesn't stand alone. It lines up with multiple other accounts from credible sources. Hugo Vickers spoke about early concerns, while Lady Colin Campbell described strict boundaries being put in place, including limiting private access in certain situations. These weren't random claims. They all pointed in the same direction. Even reporting from Rebecca English backed this up, especially when it came to the Australia tour. According to sources, it became exactly the kind of situation the Queen had hoped to avoid. That detail adds another layer to the story, and it's hard to ignore how consistent everything sounds. Then there's the personal side of it, which becomes even more intense. Reports describe phone calls from Prince Harry that left the Queen visibly shaken. These weren't light conversations. They were described as emotionally heavy, focused on ongoing issues and demands. Toward the later period of her life, it was said that others needed to be present during these calls because handling them alone became too much. When you put all of this together, a very different picture starts to form. This wasn't a simple, warm relationship. It became something much more complicated. Instead of quiet family connection, it turned into a dynamic shaped by pressure, expectations, and unresolved tensions. And then there's the workplace side of the story, which adds another shocking layer.
If the moment after you have done this so-called good deed, you pick up your phone and you say, "Town and Country, I just sent the flowers, get the poster." Seriously, it's not private.
Reports highlighted accounts from former staff, people who worked directly behind the scenes. Some even referred to themselves as the Sussex survivors, a phrase that quickly grabbed attention. According to reporting from Tom Sykes, these individuals described intense experiences while working with the couple. One moment that stood out involved footage where Meghan appeared to direct a sharp, intense look toward a staff member. Former employees claimed that moments like that stayed with them long after. One former staffer even described the situation in blunt terms, saying Meghan was a workplace psychopath, adding that she could appear warm in public while giving a completely different impression behind the scenes. That kind of statement isn't small. It's the kind that immediately sparks debate and raises serious questions. So, when the centenary arrived, and flowers were sent with a press release following right behind, it didn't land as a simple tribute. Instead, it felt like part of a bigger pattern, where every gesture comes with a message, and every message is carefully delivered for maximum impact.
Now she's using their children's titles to flog her candles. Absolutely disgraceful. But the king clearly sees nothing wrong in this because he's allowing it to continue.
Even commentary from voices like Robert Hardman added to the picture, reinforcing what many observers had already been noticing for years. The contrast couldn't have been clearer, and it definitely didn't go unnoticed. Workplace psychopath isn't just a random insult. It's actually a term used in occupational psychology to describe a very specific pattern of behavior in professional environments. It refers to someone who can turn on charm when the spotlight is on them, but then switch completely when dealing with coworkers behind the scenes. It's about calculated image control on one side and cold, controlling behavior on the other. This kind of pattern often involves using power differences to keep others in line, especially people who don't have the freedom to push back. And when you look at what's been reported about the Sussex operation, some observers say the pattern starts to look familiar across multiple situations. Take the staffing numbers, for example. Reports have pointed to a sharp drop, from around 16 team members down to just a handful over time. That kind of shift doesn't go unnoticed, especially when it's paired with accounts from former employees who later spoke about their experiences. Some of those accounts were shared with Tom Bower for his book, Revenge, Meghan, Harry, and the War Between the Windsors. According to those sources, working conditions could be extremely challenging. But when these claims surfaced, they were quickly pushed back against, with suggestions that they were part of a larger media narrative aimed at damaging reputations. Another moment that raised questions involved Gavin Burrows, who stepped away from earlier statements connected to legal proceedings reported by the Daily Mail.
Harry and Meghan plan to be half in, half-out royals, and you added, Tash, I just can't with this anymore. Harry and Meghan are still on the royal family website, and it makes it look like they work for the king. They have completely gone back on the Sandringham Agreement, declared war against Prince William and Catherine, making money off their titles.
That situation added another layer of complexity, especially for those trying to understand what was really happening behind the scenes. There was also a legal dispute involving a dance school, often referred to as the Duchess Center Ballet case in commentary, which described tension between expectations and cooperation. Again, it fed into a broader conversation about how disagreements were handled. Across all these examples, one theme keeps showing up. When working relationships break down, the response from the Sussex side often includes strong pushback, framing criticism as false, exaggerated, or driven by outside agendas. But at the same time, the number of separate accounts telling similar stories has made the situation harder for some people to ignore. And then, on that same centenary day, everything came into sharp focus through one powerful contrast. At Buckingham Palace, Catherine, Princess of Wales, was attending a formal event. Among the crowd was Tony Gladhill, an 88-year-old widower who had come because it had been his wife's wish. What happened next wasn't staged. It was natural, quiet, and deeply human. She noticed him, approached him, and took the time to speak with him directly. She encouraged him to stay in touch, speaking softly and openly. At one point, she even shared that large events can be difficult for her because of her naturally quiet voice, something she didn't hide or dress up for the moment. This wasn't a performance. It felt real. The cameras captured her gently holding his hands, giving him her full attention, creating a moment that didn't need explanation or promotion. It stood on its own because it was genuine, and that's what made the contrast so striking.
Of people around the Queen thought Meghan was, by the end, showing narcissistic tendencies. And the Queen was famously good at concealing her true thoughts. I mean, on other issues, for example, people who were very close to her swore blind to me that she was in favor of Brexit. People who were very close to her swore blind she was against it.
Because while that moment was unfolding naturally, other efforts tied to the same day were playing out in a completely different style. Carefully timed product promotions, polished messaging, and media briefings designed for maximum visibility. On one side, you had a quiet interaction between two people, built on empathy and presence. On the other, you had a highly structured rollout, complete with themed products, storytelling, and strategic timing. That's why this moment stood out so much. It wasn't about what anyone said, it was about what people saw happening in real time. One scene showed the institution working exactly as intended, human connection, respect, and sincerity at the center. The other showed a modern media operation focused on branding, messaging, and control. Both unfolded on the same day. Both were visible to the public, and without anyone needing to explain it, the difference between them spoke louder than anything else. Robert Hardman delivered his conclusion in a careful, controlled way, but the meaning behind it was impossible to miss. What he described wasn't speculation, it was a clear signal of what insiders had been seeing build up over time. According to those closest to Queen Elizabeth II, she felt deeply let down by both Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. That sentiment didn't come out of nowhere. It developed slowly, across years of tension, missed opportunities, and growing distance.
A lot of thought given to giving her patronages that meant a lot to the Queen, and rather like with the tiara, she'd sort of thought about it long and hard. Well, why don't we give Meghan this? Because this will really work for, this is a good platform for her. Those sort of things that were initially embraced by the couple and then just sort of torn up.
People who knew her best watched the situation change step by step. It started with a warm and generous welcome, full of genuine effort to make things work. But over time, that shifted into something much heavier. Difficult conversations, declined invitations, and major public projects that added pressure instead of easing it. By the end, those around her had reached a firm conclusion. The trust she placed in them had been broken in a way that couldn't be ignored. And what makes this even more striking is the idea that she understood exactly what was happening. She saw it unfold, piece by piece, during her final years. This wasn't confusion, it was awareness. She had offered support, created opportunities, and opened doors, only to see those efforts met with a powerful mix of media moves, legal strategies, and commercial activity that kept the spotlight burning bright. The gesture of sending flowers to her resting place on the centenary carries a certain meaning on its own. It suggests recognition, maybe even reflection. But when that same moment is immediately followed by a media briefing to Town and Country magazine, the message starts to feel different. It turns into something more calculated, where even a personal tribute becomes part of a bigger public narrative. That's the contrast that stood out so clearly. On one side, a lasting legacy built on duty and consistency. On the other, actions that seem tied to visibility and reaction. Both exist at the same time, but they land very differently with the public. The centenary itself reinforced just how strong her legacy remains. For many, she continues to represent stability, commitment, and a lifetime of service. But at the same time, the events surrounding that day highlighted another reality, one shaped by branding, messaging, and carefully timed moves that created a completely different kind of attention. And this is where the focus shifts to King Charles III.
The royal family made a rod for their own back with Harry. He's the perfect living example of why you teach your children actions have consequences, why you shouldn't give in to them. The same with Meghan, really.
The question now isn't just about the past, it's about what happens next. Is he fully aligned with Prince William, Prince of Wales, and the direction of the institution? Or is he balancing that with personal considerations tied to his younger son? That tension is becoming harder to ignore. Because while the working royals were visibly present at Buckingham Palace during the centenary, other details told a different story. Official listings still include Harry and Meghan, and there has been no major shift in titles or status. At the same time, product descriptions using royal titles and carefully timed media stories continued to appear, without any clear response. That silence is what's raising eyebrows. Commentators who are usually supportive of the monarchy have started to speak up. Voices that don't normally criticize are now questioning whether the lack of action is sending the wrong message. And when that kind of shift happens, it carries more impact than criticism from the usual sources. One key observation is that the current situation may be encouraging even bolder moves. The idea is simple. If boundaries are tested and nothing happens, those boundaries keep getting pushed further. It becomes a cycle where each new step goes a little bit further than the last, because there's no clear signal to stop. And that leads to a basic but powerful principle. When actions lead to consequences, behavior adjusts. But when actions don't lead to consequences, behavior evolves in a completely different direction. It expands. That's exactly why this moment matters so much. It's not just about what happened, it's about what happens next, and whether the lack of response ends up shaping everything that follows. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle aren't exactly operating in the shadows. Everything they do is out in the open. And that's what makes the situation so loud. The candle product descriptions openly use royal-style titles tied to the little ones in official marketing copy, and that content is pushed through national media channels without hesitation. At the same time, the Sussexes.com domain stays active and regularly updated, even being linked through official royal-related pages. Even earlier public tours followed a highly structured royal-style format, almost identical to traditional institutional appearances, just without the same official separation people might expect.
Catherine at Buckingham Palace yesterday talking to some lovely ladies about how difficult those events can be because it's so loud and she's got a soft voice. And it's just a really quick moment, but it is worth watching.
I think I find these environments really hard. I've also got a very soft voice, so I always get told it's
Nothing about this is hidden. It's all visible, direct, and intentional. The real question isn't whether it's secret. The question is why it continues without interruption. Because the key factor shaping all of this is simple. There's no real pushback. And King Charles III is aware of what's happening. That much is clear from repeated institutional briefings, but the decision has been to stay silent. And silence, in this case, isn't random. It's a choice, a repeated, consistent decision to absorb the situation rather than directly confront it. Whatever the reason behind that approach, whether it's family ties, long-term strategy, or concern about escalating attention, the outcome stays the same. The pattern continues, and over time it builds momentum instead of slowing down. That's how the timeline reaches major public moments like the centenary of Queen Elizabeth II, where promotional content and media briefings appear alongside official remembrance events. What started years earlier has now grown into a fully developed public pattern that no longer shows signs of friction or interruption. And right after that period, new controversies start emerging, keeping attention locked in place. One example involves a cooking-related media appearance tied to a program involving Aaron family, which sparked debate and public disagreement in Australia. The situation quickly turned into another round of media attention, adding fuel to an already ongoing conversation. Whether those moments are carefully planned or just naturally unfolding doesn't even matter as much as what they reveal. In the modern attention economy, visibility itself becomes the goal. When attention is the main currency, any reaction, positive or negative, keeps the cycle alive. That's why some observers say the strategy appears to adapt in real time. When one story fades, another appears. When attention slows down, new narratives emerge to fill the space. Another major point of focus is the way branding choices are made across platforms. The Sussexes.com site has featured updates tied to international appearances, while other platforms connected to charitable work remain separate. That contrast has drawn attention from analysts watching how different identities are presented online. The key distinction comes down to branding direction. One platform centers the Sussex title directly, while another focuses on independent charitable identity through the Archewell Foundation structure. And that difference matters because it shapes perception.
Exclusively told me it gives me PTSD. It's classic Meghan, literally a workplace psychopath, smiling to the public on one side of her face and glowering at you on the secret side. The woman treats anyone she has power over as totally disposable. You are just treated like a tradesman who is there to fix the toilet.
Choosing one platform over another isn't just technical, it sends a message about what identity is being prioritized at any given moment. Even more significant is how these links appear within broader institutional spaces. References tied to Sussex branding appear alongside official royal-related pages, creating a visual connection between independent commercial activity and formal institutional presence. That overlap is what makes the situation so unusual. A curated institutional website is meant to clearly separate roles, identities, and responsibilities. But in this case, the lines appear less defined. So what you end up with is a system where official structure and independent branding exist side by side, connected through links, visibility, and public association. And that combination is exactly what keeps the discussion going, because every new update reinforces the same question: where does one identity end and the other begin? And the institutional response to all of this stays the same: quiet, controlled, and carefully measured. The official line from the palace is that there are no plans to change how things are listed or displayed. No big announcements, no sudden shifts, just steady silence in the background. Prince William, Prince of Wales, has never publicly laid out his position in detail. But that silence isn't random, it's intentional. His approach to anything involving his brother has been described as a wall of distance, where private conversations stay private because anything shared could quickly turn into public content. People close to him, including commentary from figures like Charlotte Griffiths, have suggested his stance is clear even without him speaking directly. Across his actions, whether it's structured communication, avoiding joint appearances, or maintaining strict separation in public engagements, the message stays consistent: keep distance, stay controlled, and avoid overlap. From that perspective, his position is simple. Titles should be removed, listings adjusted, and agreements enforced exactly as written under the Sandringham Estate framework. No blur, no flexibility. On the other side, King Charles III is taking a very different approach. His strategy has been described as absorbing pressure rather than escalating it, choosing stability over confrontation, even when things get loud. That difference between father and heir creates a visible gap in direction. One is focused on long-term institutional structure, while the other is managing the present moment with caution and restraint. And that gap becomes especially noticeable during major public events. Because on the centenary day of Queen Elizabeth II, both approaches were visible at the same time. On one side, working royals were present at formal commemorations at Buckingham Palace, honoring her legacy in a traditional and structured way. On the other side, promotional activity tied to Sussex branding appeared in public circulation: gift boxes, media messaging, and product descriptions that used royal-linked references in a commercial style. And the timing made it impossible to ignore. What makes this moment even more intense is what insiders claim about her final years. Reports suggest she was aware of growing tensions and that she experienced emotional strain during difficult conversations and family pressure behind the scenes. According to those accounts, efforts were made to manage access and reduce stress during sensitive periods. And yet, despite those attempts, the outcome didn't stay contained. The events of the centenary became the clearest snapshot of everything unfolding over time. On the same day, two completely different pictures appeared in the public record. One was a formal moment of remembrance, quiet, respectful, and rooted in tradition. The other was a fast-moving media and branding cycle, built around attention, timing, and visibility. Even small details from that day now sit side by side in the archive. A gentle, human interaction between Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Tony Gladhill at the palace is recorded in the same historical space as influencer deliveries and media briefings tied to Sussex branding. And that contrast is what defines the centenary in hindsight. Not commentary, not interpretation, but the raw record of what happened, placed side by side in history. One space represented tradition, ceremony, and continuity. The other represented modern media strategy, branding, and attention-driven communication. Both existed on the same day. Both were visible to the public. And together, they formed a permanent snapshot of how different worlds inside the same system can collide in plain sight. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Crown Clash for daily fresh updates and the newest royal insights. Thank you for watching. See you next time.